On the Boston College Sports Network, this is the podcast for Boston, the official podcast of Boston College Athletics. Welcome to the latest episode of Committed to BC, the official team podcast of Boston College football. And now your hosts, former Eagles quarterback Scott Mutryn and BCEagles.com's Dan Rubin.
Hey everyone, welcome inside the podcast for Boston, the official podcast network of Boston College Athletics, and welcome to a very special season debut episode of Committed to BC, the official podcast of Boston College football. I'm your host, Dan Rubin, joined as always by my partner in crime, Eagles legend, former starting quarterback Scot Mutryn. A very special season getting set to get started as 2024 opens a new era in Boston College football. Scott, we got a packed show on tap. It is just great to see you. It is great to get this year underway. It is great to be back. It is great. That's the only thing I can keep coming back to. It is great. Football is back.
Without a doubt, great. Not as great as your three intros that it took to get into this, but you did a great job getting us to here, Dan. Everyone, it's preseason for everyone right now, buddy. So we live, we learn, and we get better. We're always improving. As Tom O'Brien would say, you either get better, you get worse, you never stay the same. So we're going to get better. You're going to get better, and I'm excited for it.
You really had to call out the rule of three for me, which is I either get it in one or I get it in three. I never get it in two.
I respect that, though, but we just got to let the audience know that this isn't just a fine, well-tuned machine right out the gates, that there's some work to this. The process. We're going to talk about that later, too. The process. Not the 76ers process either.
Well, that one is still going. Well, Committed to BC is the official podcast of Boston College football, and it is brought to you by SeatGeek, the official ticket marketplace of the Boston College Eagles. Find tickets to Eagles games and more on SeatGeek. And Scott, we are going to be joined in this podcast by head coach Bill O'Brien, coming hot straight out of the gates. First episode of the new era. We're going to talk to the head coach, and there is a lot to get to for a first game, namely because, well, I don't know if people are aware, if they've been living under the proverbial rock for the last 7 months, but this is not just a continuation of success from last year. This is a whole brand new set of wheels for the Eagles to be driving this year. New head coach, pretty much everybody's back, but a new schedule, new ACC with the amount of teams. It is not your daddy's old ACC season coming up for the Eagles.
Welcome to the ever-changing landscape of college football today. So it's a beautiful thing. Things change, things will change, but I always love summer. I do love summer, but it's always good to start talking about football, and it's good to get my mind off some other things that are going on. But it's always, I always enjoy the football season, and really looking forward to this team with Coach O'Brien. I've had some chance is to spend some time with him and the staff. I have not seen as many practices as I would like because of other commitments, but really excited to see this team and to see where they're headed.
I think this is the first time we've had a coach on that has actively coached against you in college football.
Yeah, I mean, he knew my true abilities, and was feared, had some fear there. So that was you could sense it in his voice. There was trepidation there, but it's good to have those in there and still get my athleticism made fun of every so often. Always good.
Well, BC entering 2024 in the heels of a 7-6 record last year, 3-5 in the ACC. A bowl championship win in last December's Fenway Bowl by beating SMU, a team they will face this year as an ACC conference opponent after the Mustangs joined the league with Cal and Stanford. That's right. The Atlantic Coast Conference has teams stretching all the way to the Pacific Coast, and I couldn't be happier. I love the fact that SMU's there. Cal and Stanford, two great institutions who will not appear on this year's BC football season schedule, but things do kick off Monday night at the soupy, swampy Doak Campbell Stadium in Tallahassee, Florida. It's going to be 90 degrees and muggy, but the Florida State Seminoles, a top 10 team entering this season, who lost their opening game to Georgia Tech last week in week 0 out in Ireland, 24-21. A really strange setup that it's a week 1 Monday night, opening night matchup And Florida State's already 0-1, and that was not something that anybody saw coming, Scott.
Yeah, to say the least. Did not expect that. Did not expect to see that upset. But when you talk about the travel schedule, I always cheer for early games. For the far games, the earlier the better. And of course, we start the year off on a Monday at 7:30 in Florida. So I'll probably be pulling into my driveway just as I'm sending my daughter off to her first day of school, if I'm lucky.
That is I'm looking forward to the next morning because I am sending my daughter to preschool, and if I had to guess, she'll be up at about 5:30 in the morning. So while you at least get the serenity of the plane, I will have the child come running in and waking me up from a sound sleep. I'm really stoked about that. The 7:30 p.m. Monday starts are not conducive to men over the age of 35 anymore.
100%. I can 100% agree with that, by the way.
Well, the 2024 season, even though it kicks off against Florida State, it is part of a season that is, it's going to be a fun year, regardless of how anyone, tries to slice the schedule. Record predictions. I hate record predictions. I don't do them for largely because you never know you never know what's going to happen. You can't look at September 21st until you get through September 2nd, and et cetera. But BC, a season that kicks off with Florida State, includes games at Missouri in a reboot or remake of a matchup that happened a couple of years ago up here in Chestnut Hill, hosting Michigan State, hosting Western Kentucky. And then, of course, like I mentioned, the one division ACC, Louisville, Syracuse, they're coming in. North Carolina, Pittsburgh, they're coming in. You're on the road at Virginia Tech, and at SMU. It's going to be a tough haul, and it's going to be a tough haul regardless of how you look at it, Scott. But look at this BC team and think about that. Is it that much of a tough haul if everybody makes the next step and everybody makes a jump in their development? Because this was a pretty darn good team last year, and 7-6, a 6-6 regular season does not quite indicate how good this team played in the middle stretch of the season.
Yeah, and the tough thing here, Coach O'Brien, we discuss it with him, is every new year is a new team. And if you look at on paper, everything looks like, hey, it's really front loaded for BC if they can get through these first 3 weeks of the season, minus a couple here or there. The schedule lines up based on last year, but last year it doesn't mean anything when you head into this year. You just never know what type of team you're going to have. You don't know what type whether injuries or performance. You really just take some time to figure out who you're going to be. And I know you don't like the prediction. I can tell you the type of team BC will be probably after the first half of the second game, because you just need a full game and some change to figure it out. The amount of times that people win the first game of the season and then go out to have a terrible year are more than you can imagine, and vice versa. When they lose their first game, everyone thinks the sky's falling, and then what do you know? They come back and have a great season. So, after 3 weeks, you're going to have 2 really tough road games out of the way. You'll have 3 road games the rest of the year. It'll set up well for them, but it doesn't mean anything if everyone doesn't kind of do their job. Everyone doesn't stay healthy, and then you see the progress throughout the year. You always want to be getting better throughout the year and finding out who you're going to be, and then identify the scheme that's going to be most successful for you offensively and defensively. And, that's going to be the challenge. I think this last 6 months that Coach O'Brien's been there, he's getting to know his personnel, not just as people, but as to know what it's going to take for them to be successful. How to run his offense the way he wants to based on the personnel he has, and how to run a defense that suits what they have. And it's going to be a great experience. As you just see the way Coach O'Brien carries himself, the way his coaches carry himself. These guys, they know what they're doing, and there's a good mix of some younger and older guys on the staff. I think it breeds a lot of life in there. You got 4 former NFL head coaches on the staff. At least 3, but you can't underestimate how big of an impact that is with some guys that have a lot of experience in big time settings to be able to learn and to share that knowledge with their teammates and some of the younger coaches too. I think it's great. I think hope springs eternal, and if this team embraces Coach O'Brien and gets through the adversity, because there's always going to be adversity in some way, shape, or form. But that's the true test of a team, is when you look adversity in the mouth and you're willing to look it in the face and just stare it down and pick yourself up. And I think that's going to be the big thing, is how they handle that adversity, and it takes strong leadership to do that.
And a sign of how strong Boston College is as a team, and obviously results or performances. This is not necessarily what we're talking about here, but we're talking about how the culture is, how the team locker room is. The Eagles lost virtually nobody to the transfer portal after a coaching change. And to bring you back over kind of the timeline of what we looked at in the offseason, Bill O'Brien, and we allude to it with him, was hired as the offensive coordinator at Ohio State in mid-January. Roughly 2 weeks later, as he's shuttling between Boston, where he had just wrapped up his tenure with the Patriots, shuttling out to coach with Ryan Day out at Ohio State, head coach Jeff Hafley leaves Boston College to go take the defensive coordinator position with the Green Bay Packers. That opens up a very uncertain, and I think all of us can admit this, uncertain time period for the Eagles before they hire Bill O'Brien, in the 2 weeks leading up to that hire, which was that the transfer portal had closed for incoming transfers to your standard incoming Boston College transfer that maybe was going to sign with the program, and had been recruited by the older staff for that purpose, or brought by that staff for that purpose. What happens, though, after a coach leaves is there is a mandatory outgoing portal, and players are allowed to leave anytime there's a coaching change. Nobody of what I like to say, nobody of consequence, nobody who everybody was like, oh, this guy's gone, this guy's gone, this guy's gone. Nobody really left. The players that did transfer out to seek their own improved status or improved situation somewhere else are players that maybe had just needed a fresh start or needed a new opportunity, and that's totally fine. Nobody ever criticizes anyone for leaving a particular program, or shouldn't, at least, because it's a personal decision. But the incoming transfers are all in, and the roster remains in, which means that Tommy Castellanos remains your quarterback. He didn't go anywhere. Some of the players, Donovan Ezaraku, he's still in Boston. He's still on the Boston College defensive line. This team is, none of your offensive linemen left. Drew Kendall, he's still here. Everybody was in, and nobody left. And when you look at the players that came in, the Kamari Moraleses of the world, who's a tight end from North Carolina, Trayshawn Ward, formerly of Florida State, through Kansas State, now to BC, Ryan Turner from Ohio State, Cam Martinez from Ohio State, Shake McGowan from Vanderbilt. These are all guys who are potential impact players. And Scott, the fact that they're coming into a roster that did not have a whole lot of overhaul in a coaching change, some of the coaches were retained for this year. That is, Boston College handled that as a team about as well could be expected in a period of uncertainty that was basically mandatory, because just of the situation that it thrusts your program into a period of uncertainty.
Yeah, and I think it says a lot about Coach O'Brien to be able to go in there and get his message across. And there's kind of two ways in which that goes. There's, when you get a new coach in, it's everyone is like, oh, I'm not buying into what this guy's saying. I don't like the message. I like the other guy. Or you're hearing that the scheme is going to change and it's not going to accentuate what's best for you. So then guys tend to leave. Those are kind of the two ways in which you look at it. And for Coach O'Brien, to be able to come in and, for lack of a better term, sell what his vision is, and for those guys to buy in wholeheartedly and only lose, I think, 1 to 2 guys that left, that's a testament to him, the testament to the message he's delivering to them. But if you're a football player and your goal is to play in the next level, and you see the resume of the guy coming in is better than the guy that left, and no offense to Coach Hafley, it's just Bill's a little older and has had the experience and the success, that's a win. And the connections and the knowledge that he has of the Sunday game is something that these players can thrive on and learn from. So that's to be in the situation Boston College was in, and to end up at, dare I say, it's a better situation coaching wise, just based on Coach O'Brien's resume. I think that's very, very unusual, especially at a place like Boston College. Maybe you could see that at like a bigger time program, but to see that at BC, I think says a lot for the institution, and Blake James and everyone on his staff that was a part of this hiring deserves credit for getting Coach O'Brien here, and upping the resume of the football coach at Boston College. It's such a very, very important time as you're getting expansion, as you talked about in the ACC, but you're also going to start seeing other TV deals start to end, and what's college football going to look like. And if BC wants to be in that mix, they're going to need to be performing at a high level in the ACC and on the national stage to put themselves in the conversation that they want to be in for big-time college football.
One of the things that I know I mentioned when Bill O'Brien was hired was beyond the obvious, which is he shook Sinatra's hand. He worked with Bill Belichick and Coach Tom Brady. Like that's the he shook Sinatra's hand of football.
Right.
But I mean, beyond that, you're taking a different style and a different perspective on a team that, and I know things are different year over year, but you're taking a quarterback or an offensive line or wide receiver, and you're giving them different perspectives, which is, last year they had one type of offense. They had a multiple pro style. They had an offensive coordinator who ran one style. They had, and Steve Shimko, Coach Hafley was a defensive-minded coach. He gave them different perspectives. You're replacing that largely bulk, that large bulk with an offensive-minded coach who has run a very different style at Alabama, a defensive coordinator in Tim Lewis, who is a football genius. I mean, this guy has been around the block, was a defensive coordinator for the Steelers, the Giants, been at the Houston Gamblers in the UFL, has been at SMU in the late 80s when they were putting things together, when they were putting their team back together. He is a brilliant defensive backs mind, and you're getting all these different perspectives. And one of the things, not to give out too much, that we talk about with Bill O'Brien is taking that aspect on a team that is trained to play a certain way and it understands a certain type of game. And now you're taking little different changes to it. It's almost like a different dialect of the same language, or installing different parts of an entirely new language altogether. Scott, you've been through something like that with a coaching change, and you've been through that type of change where you went through a coordinator and a head coach in different mentalities and different languages. If you're able to latch on, and if you go into it with an open mind as a player, the sky's the limit, because it's all designed to help you see the game differently.
You know what, Dan? I'm really proud of you for bringing this question up. This is a great, well thought question, but I think it's something that really needs to be addressed and discussed. Because here's the fact of the matter is, a lot of coaches nowadays, or actually even back in the day when I played, is a coach was hired and a coach came in and put in, quote unquote, his system, offensively or defensively, right? And whether that system fit the personnel he had or not, he was going to run it, because that's the only thing that he knew. That's what got him to this level, and he was going to coach that system, right? The sign of a true great coach is to be able to take your system and fit it around the personnel in which you have. Now, eventually you want to get to the ideal personnel in your system, but you can't do that in college football right away. It helps now with the transfer portal, but not at a place like BC, because you're just not going to get that many. You're not going to get Colorado, scale of transfers. So the sign of a great coach is to be able to identify your team, identify your personnel, and fit what you are trying to do, the scheme you're trying to run, around the people that you have. And if you can do that, that's what gets people to stay, and that's how you're successful. And too many times coaches, like, these are supposed to be the best coaches in the world. If you're the best, well, next to the NFL guys, right? But all these guys have had NFL experience, but coached at a high level in college. If you coached on the highest level, I would think that you're an outstanding coach. And because of that, you have to be able to teach and to adapt what you're doing to the people in which you have. And if you can do that, that transition becomes a lot smaller time frame. And it allows you to really get your team up and running. And it doesn't say, oh, we needed a rebuild year because we didn't have the right guys here. Well, that's kind of not the way it works, not in today's society anymore. A good coach needs to be able to take what he has and make the best of it, and then win with those guys, and then eventually migrate to the type and to the players in which he wants.
Well, we're going to take a quick step aside and let you listen to our interview with head coach Bill O'Brien, which I think a lot of people will see a completely different side than sometimes you catch based off the reports coming out of practice or seeing some of the things based on what he's talked about. I think it was a great opportunity for us to showcase a bit of what he brings to the table in a more intimate, personal setting, as they say. So we'll let you step aside and listen to that interview right here on Committed to BC, the season debut episode here on the podcast for Boston. Our guest this week, very excited for our first episode of the season to have him on. Head coach Bill O'Brien of Boston College Eagles joining us. Coach, first off, welcome to your debut here on the new version of the podcast for Boston with Committed to BC. We're excited to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm looking forward to a great year and really excited to join you guys too. Thank you.
Well, we'll see if we can keep that expectation high. That means I'm not going to ask a lot of questions because Scott, I got to let you take this one, Scott, because if he's excited, then the only thing I can do is torpedo this. Coach, heading into the season, I know you're at the end of camp. You're into a game week. First, the excitement level just of getting into a game week. First, congratulations on making it. Like I know that is kind of one of those like, oh, hey, we made it. We're here. But based on where you were at the beginning of the month, just to get into a game week, I mean, what's the energy for you? What's the energy for the guys just to have this opportunity to put them on?
Yeah, it's definitely a almost like a second wind, right? So you go through training camp, 20 practices. It was a very physical training camp. And then the next step of the process here is getting ready for a game. So it's a whole different, schedule, mindset, all of that. And it's very exciting. It's always, football game weeks. I said to the team the other day, in basketball, you play, 80 something games. Baseball plays 162 games. Football, we only get 12 opportunities, hopefully more than that, but 12 opportunities. And so we have to make the most of every day of a game week. So it's a fun time. It's an exciting time. And these guys, they're excited about it.
And Coach, a unique aspect in this, Florida State, your opponent week one has already played a game. So you've had a chance to watch them and see how – I always love at the beginning of these every new year brings a new team. There's always expectation from what the team was before, but every new year is a new team no matter how many players you're returning. You're coming in the different light where this is your first time at Boston College. You've probably seen some of these other teams before, but how much has being able to watch Florida State play to get a sense of what their identity is going to be this year, maybe changes the game plan of what you've watched from last year? Because just the simple part of Travis is kind of a different type of quarterback than DJU is. So does a lot of that play into it, or do you really use a lot of what last year was to kind of get a sense of that?
Yeah, we definitely study this game that they played against Georgia Tech, very closely, because exactly what you said. I mean, every year is different. There are things from last year relative to their team that will carry over, whether it's personnel or scheme or, things that you can tell that they have a strong belief in, but they're definitely, different things. Like you mentioned, the most obvious is at the quarterback position, different types of quarterback than the one that they had last year now with DJ this year. So, and they have a lot of transfers. I think they have like 17 transfers on their team. A couple guys, more than a few guys that transferred from Alabama when I was at Alabama. So they I'm familiar with them, whether it's Roydell Williams or, the wide receiver and then, the DB Earl Little. So Malik Benson, the wide receiver. So, there's some guys that I'm familiar with, and but different team than last year for Florida State. So we definitely study both. We study the Boston College game, from last year, even though that's different schemes. We want to watch that game because that's important relative to a lot of the guys that played in that game will be playing in this game. So, we definitely study both years.
Which brings up an interesting question. It's when you mentioned scheme. Obviously you want to employ your own scheme when you come into this, but you also are, as being a great coach as you are, because you've had success. How much of it is recognizing the identity of what your team is and fitting your scheme around the guys you have now, and then eventually getting to where you want to get to.
No doubt. Absolutely no doubt. I'm more of a, scheme is, don't get me wrong. I mean, we've got to run the correct play based on what we study on film and things like that on both sides of the ball and on special teams. But at the end of the day, like, who is our team? And I feel like we have a team that over the course of training camp is a physically tougher team than we were, 6 weeks ago. I think a mentally tougher team. That's got to show up on Monday night, in all three phases. I think these games always come down to, like, up front, right? Offensive and defensive lines, who can control the line of scrimmage. Like, that's big. And I think it also comes down to taking care of the football in these early games. Like, can we come out of it in a clean way relative to, 100% ball security? And can we get a few takeaways? That would be huge for us. So, but our identity, I think, is what I believe is Boston College is, we've got to be a team that is good up front on both sides of the ball. And I think we are, and we've got to go out there and improve that and be able to run the ball, stop the run, and then be a smart football team. That's what we have to do. We've got to be a very disciplined, smart team. And, that's going to help us, relative to how we play against Florida State.
Coach, when you look at a team like Florida State as well, like, I know that, over the course of training camp, I know I asked you a couple times just about base installs and then kind of building off of that and how things get refined for you and how you want to kind of employ things. Are in a game or going into a first game, are there now at this point things that you understand, okay, this is maybe what we wanted to do, but we can't do, but this is now what we want to do and we can do? And it kind of in the middle, are there things that you didn't expect out of this team that, now in a game situation, maybe you'll be able to do?
Yeah, great question. I'm not going to give you the exacts on that, but that's exactly right. Right. There's certain things that we came out of spring practice, hey, I believe we can do this. There's other things that factor in there too. Like, there were some guys in spring practice that, were injured or maybe vice versa. Some guys that were healthy in spring practice, but have been injured. So injuries take place, right? So you have to factor that in. But, at the end of the day, we had 20 practices plus all the spring practices to figure out who we are. And I think early on, I think we have a good grasp of who we are and what we want to be and who the guys are that we need to lean on and put in position to make plays. I believe we have an idea of who that is. And, obviously we have a returning quarterback that's a very dynamic player in Tommy Castellanos. Everybody knows that, but we have other guys, right? Other side of the ball, we have a returning defensive end that's a very disruptive player in Donovan Ezaraku. But there's other guys that have shown up and have helped us to figure out what we can do and how we can be. And so I think you're right about that. We feel like we have a good grasp on what that is. And again, we have to figure that out and see if that's right going into the game.
Shifting gears, just a bit for me too, is from the pro game to the college game. One is, and this is one of those things that I love to pick coaches' brains on when they've been at every level, is how much of the game, like, just seeing the game differently for you. Like, you've been at the college level, you coached even, college back with George O'Leary in the 90s and had been at Maryland and Duke. How much has the college game just evolved and as a coach made you evolve as well to identify that college kids sometimes do things a little bit differently and you can do some different things with them?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved a lot. I mean, like offensively, especially, it's much more of a, the quarterback in college football is kind of like a point guard, right? He distributes the ball in a lot of different ways. Whereas when Scott played, it was a little bit different, right? It was, a little bit of ground and pound, play action, try to throw the ball down the field, quick game, things like that. Now it's different, right? You've got these guys, that are, like I said, they're more like the guy I had at Alabama, Bryce Young. He was a point guard. Same thing for Tommy. Like, anything from, throwing bubbles to empty to whatever it might be. And then, once in a while being able to take your shots. At the end of the day, though, you still have to be able to run the football and you still have to be able to stop the run, especially in this game coming up, because both teams are going to try to establish a line of scrimmage, like I said. And so those types of things haven't changed They just changed how we do them. When I was at Georgia Tech, we ran the wishbone. We ran a veer option with the quarterback under center. Well, now the wishbone now is the, kind of the zone read, the quarterback run game. It's the same, concept, but it's run from the shotgun. So that's just one example of 1,000 examples of how the game has changed. And it's pretty cool. I really realized that when I went to Alabama. I had been at the Texans for 7 seasons, and then I went to Alabama, and I was like, whoa, this game has changed from when I was at Penn State. So learned a lot at Alabama, and, hopefully we do a good job of putting our guys in position.
Coach, you obviously didn't watch me run enough when we played Georgia Tech because I still had wheels back in those days. It's now I don't, but back in the day.
I didn't say
Randy
anything
Eckler
about your
nightmares
wheels.
of me.
I didn't say anything about your wheels or lack thereof. I just was trying to make the point, like, having been around you a few times now, you are a big guy, and, like, I'm sure you did have wheels, but you're a big physical guy. So I'm sure you were a drop back guy and tried to sling it.
Very different type of big guy than I am. We'll put it that way. There's 2 types of big.
Coach, you talked a little bit about this earlier, the leadership aspect. Obviously, it's nice having a returning quarterback, but when you're coming in into a new program, I would think part of the coach's job is to find who your guys are, who are the guys that control the room, and who are the guys that are going to be there and help your message get delivered and understand what we're trying to get done. And what would you say who would you say are your biggest leaders that you've seen so far?
Yeah, well, we elected captains the other day, so I'm not sure when this podcast comes out, but it'll be announced here shortly. So there were clearly 6 guys on this team that the team voted for. It was, not even close, right? So it was Drew Kendall, Tommy Castellanos, and Ozzie Trapillo on offense, Donovan Ezaraco and Cam Arnold on defense, and Joe Marinaro as a special teams captain. So 6 guys that, it was just clear, like, everybody voted for these guys. And, I think those were the guys. If you had to sit me down before that vote, I would have said those 6 guys too, because you could just tell as training camp was going that those were the leaders. There are other leaders, there's guys like, on defense, obviously Bam Crouch, KP Price, Owen McGowan, Cam Horsley, is a really good leader. Like, there's other guys with great leadership qualities. There's on offense, Logan Taylor, Kai Robichaud, Dino Tomlin, Lewis Bond. I mean, there's other guys on the team that lead too. It was just that these guys got the most votes. But, I think we do have a really good team of really good guys that care about BC and care about winning and playing good football. So I think that was pretty obvious in training camp.
And then to go to the other aspect of it, what about some of the newcomers or younger players that you maybe didn't know about but have come into the system that have really impressed you throughout camp?
Yeah, there's been some new guys that have been really good on offense. The running back Turbo Richard, he's been really good. Tough, fast, good hands out of the backfield, good vision, good cutting ability. This guy's going to be a really good player. John Montague on offense, another guy that came here as a quarterback. We're playing him at quarterback and at wide receiver. He's been very, very impressive. Defensively, I would say a couple guys. Omar Thornton has had a really good camp. Safety, DB, plays different spots over on defense. Charlie Camella has had a good camp. He's a very athletic guy. Good young player that we think can be good. Jason Flint, I don't know how much he'll play this year because we're pretty, loaded there at defensive end, but you can tell he's got a good future. So there are guys that are newcomers. I would also mention like Cam Martinez, who wasn't here in the spring, who transferred from Ohio State. I feel like he's going to really help us too. So yeah, there's some newcomers that I think have really good futures.
Coach, based off of, you mentioned Ohio State, and I think about the timeline that before you came to BC was, I think it was about 34 days where you had been hired by Ohio State. The Boston College job opens. You get hired by Boston College. It's been about what now 7 months that you, I don't even know. We'll call it returned home from 2 weeks away. Just have you been able to catch your breath and kind of sit back and and look a little bit at this particular program and just kind of collect what brought you here in the the funny thing of life that led to you getting to BC.
Yeah, no, I mean, during July, I took some time off and spent a lot of time with my family. I mean, this is an incredible place. I mean, you guys know that. I mean, I say this all the time. Like we're a fantastic academic school. We're got a beautiful campus, got a great student body. We're 15 minutes from downtown Boston. We can be good in football. And I think like, we've had several guest speakers at our training camp. So we've had Father Jack, Father Tony, we had Shauna Cooper Whitehead, we had Dr. Carl Bell yesterday speak to our team. And all of them talk about Boston College in a very unique way. But the theme is Boston College is a place where it's going to get the most out of you individually, right? It's going to be a place where you're going to have a great academic experience. You're going to give back to the community, and whatever your extracurricular activity is, football for us, you're going to be good in football. Like you can do it all. You don't have to just be a football player. You don't have to just be a student. I think that's one of the clear messages, and that's what I love about BC. And look, like you said, we haven't even been here a year. We got a long way to go, but I think these guys have bought into that. Hey, look, you can balance different things, and we can help you balance these things, but we're gonna really strive to be good in everything. And I believe you can do that here, and we're trying to get that done every single day.
This is really the last one for me before I turn it. And I'm gonna make Scott shake his head at me at this, because we do talk a lot about like pregame food, pregame eats on this podcast. Like that is what that is what I do.
We forgot to tell you that one previously.
Yeah,
we have to spring one on you.
We have to spring one on you. I mean, we are a food pot. We are a food. Yeah. I mean, you don't get to look like me without knowing your way around a platter.
Nothing better than food. I love food.
What's on the O'Brien? We're gonna go. I mean, I know the game's on Monday. I know it's on the road, but what is on the pregame O'Brien family platter? If we're looking at a home, you get that last meal before you come home. I guess it'll be next week before Duquesne. What's like the pre-night meal that before you're heading into game week?
Are you talking about like the pregame meal, or are you talking about like me going out to dinner with my wife or something like that?
You know what? We're going to give you both of them. We're going to ask for both of them. We got to know both now.
So the pregame meal is definitely chicken parm. I want, if it's obviously a night game like it will be, I want chicken parm. I want a baked potato. I'll have a little bit of salad, but the salad's got to be like a Caesar salad, something with some good dressing on it. And then bread. I love bread. It's got to be good bread. But like relative to going out to dinner like during the week, maybe not the Duquesne week because that's a short week, but maybe like the Missouri week, if you go out to dinner with my wife, we've got to go to either a seafood place, an Italian place, or maybe a place like in Newton Center, like Barmore, where they have good bar food, good pub food, so that'll be like the away from the team meal, if that makes sense.
I think
laughing
Rubin,
at me.
That's like you're speaking Rubin when you start talking chicken parm. The guy's he's salivating right now. He's probably going to go get that chicken salad sandwich.
Listen, right I had a cookout for my wife's birthday before the weekend, and the salad was there. It was there specifically just to have it, just so we could say we had it, but nobody touched it, and there was no shot I was taking it.
I mean, that's just typical Rubin on top of that. I just have two more real quick ones. Coach, now that you're back, and it's kind of along the lines of what Danny's saying, what's been kind of whether it's the nicest place or biggest surprise of coming back to the area, especially BC? I mean, I know you were down in Foxborough for a little while, but has anything kind of stood out to you about BC in your time back?
Man, I don't know where to begin. I mean, there's when I came to games here in the past, like I'm talking about like the mid 80s or even the early 90s, like I never really saw the campus, Scott. Like I didn't go to I didn't go to middle campus. I didn't go to upper campus. So just the campus, I mean, it is an incredible campus, and the way that it's set up, and the $1 million steps, and all those different things. I mean, it's just a beautiful campus, and I love walking around it. Today we had a meeting with Father Leahy, all staff meeting over in Robsham. So you got to walk across campus, and I think that's a segue into my next thing is the student body. yesterday spoke to the freshman class in Conti, and it was just awesome. I mean, those kids are excited about football, and the student body here is very excited about sports in general, football in the fall, and we really need them. Big last year, I think we averaged between 5,000, 6,000 students per game, and I think that's great. The student support is huge. So I don't think those are surprises. It's just very cool to be a part of that. I think the other thing is, like, I love the team. I love coaching the team. These guys have, they emptied the tank in training camp, Scott. They really did. It was a very physical training camp. It was a tough training camp, and they gave us everything they had. And I'm proud of those guys for that. And now we transition into the next phase. And I think the big thing that we try to talk about is a lot of these guys nowadays, young people, they're very results oriented, right? Like all right, we got to win. We got to do this. No. You and I both know, like, it's all about the process of what it takes to win, right? It really is, focusing on your job. Get the play call. What is my job on this play call? And make sure that I do the best I can on this play call, and then play the next play. Like, don't worry about the scoreboard. Don't worry about anything other than, trying to dominate my role in the game. And I think that's what we'll be preaching all week to these guys.
Yeah, the process stuff is just, it sounds so cliche, but if your process isn't good, it's just, it doesn't matter. Results will not come.
Right.
I do have a funny one. I was at campus with my son for a visit, and I walked into BAP's library for the first time ever, which is embarrassing.
That's a great place.
Been on campus probably about 35 years, and first time I walked into the library, my wife was thoroughly impressed. So that was great. But lastly, just for me, and this one kind of with the pro background you had, I always find this difficult because you can look at your team and see, man, we look really good on offense, but it can be like, we're good on offense because we stink on D, or vice versa, because you don't get to play or have that preseason game. When you don't have that preseason game, first of all, how difficult is that? And then how long do you think it takes you to really understand the identity of your team?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, the preseason games, they definitely helped in the pros, although they were very watered down schematic games. You know what I mean? Like, you're seeing cover 3, cover 2, cover 1 on, you're not seeing all the exotic things. But anyways, I do think you have a good point that you're able to see, like, hey, can we run the ball? Can we stop the run? Will this receiver be a guy that can help us? All those different things. I think that's why it's so important I have a strong belief about this, that you have, number one, a physical camp. So you can see, like, hey, when we go live and we're playing a game, and you get the team ready to, even though it's not a game, I get it. You get the team ready to scrimmage, like, this is a move the ball period, or this is a scrimmage, or, then if you do that 3 or 4 times throughout training camp, I do think you can start to understand what your team is and what they can do. Can they run the ball downhill? Can they stop the run? Will we be able to complete shot passes? Can we protect? Can we rush the passer with 4? Or are we going to need a 5th guy in the rush, or a simulated rush? Or can we cover man-to-man? Can we tackle? Can we break tackles? Can we move the ball and, in the open field, can we make people miss? So I think that's why it's so important. Like, if you didn't have a physical training camp, you really wouldn't know any of that until you got to the first game, and that could be a shock to the system. So I think that's why we try to do it that way.
That's great. I really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you on the plane in a couple days.
Yes, sir.
And then at halftime, and I promise I'm pretty gentle at halftime. If I bother you, you can just subtly just jab me underneath there. I haven't had any issues yet. Adazio got close a couple times, but we can go at it a little bit if you want. Like, if I ask a dumb question, just give me the shut your mouth look. I was going to use a bad word, but I'm not going to do that because Dan won't cut that out, and then I'll get yelled at. So, but you know what I mean.
Do not worry one bit about me at halftime. I've done a lot of halftime interviews.
Okay, look forward to seeing you on the team plane.
Okay, guys.
Thanks, Coach.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Hey, Eagle football fans. SeatGeek makes it easy to find tickets so you can be a part of all the touchdown celebrations this season. Whether you're buying or selling football tickets, SeatGeek is the place to do it. SeatGeek is the official ticket marketplace of the Boston College Eagles. Expect the expected. SeatGeek. Well, we're back here on Committed to BC, the official football podcast of Boston College Eagles on the podcast for Boston. Scott, this year we mentioned the expanded ACC and just the different ways that college football is changing. Week 1, right around the corner, even week 0, it is just going to be very interesting to see how these teams go for broke when the opportunities present themselves, because these leagues are getting bigger, the margins for error are getting smaller, and while the expanded playoff offers more access, there's a lot more teams with access to that. So it's going to be a fun season, and this year specifically in the ACC is going to be really intriguing to see what happens with what is it? A 16-17 league. I think it's 16 teams.
Yeah, and here's the other thing is because of the expanded playoffs, it keeps more people in the game, right? Think about how many times after week 1 or week 2, people are like, well, done with the national championship start, or they have a good team and they lose a tough game here, they have an injury and things happen. Now that you're introducing 12 teams into this, it really is going to keep everyone's interest a lot longer. And I think that's helpful. I really do like the expanded format. It's going to be interesting to see once you get outside those top 24 teams, those top 12 teams, what it's going to look like kind of in the postseason form and everything that comes with it. Because I know a lot of people talk in the bowl games about so many people sitting out, so many people not playing, and the quality of the bowl season wasn't as high for some people. But I think that's exciting. I think the ACC with the new additions is going to be exciting. The fact that BC has played SMU last year to end the year, and then they're going to play them again this year is going to be down in Dallas is going to be a great new thing. But it's still in the end, it's still football, right? It doesn't matter who you're playing against. You still got to be able to worry about yourself and do the best job of your team instead of getting caught up in the semantics of everything expanded. In the end, you got to still play the guy ahead of you. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to be a successful team. And you can find a million excuses as to why you can't do it. But if you're willing to pay the price, then you're going to be able to sit down and not let those outside influences and negative influences kind of affect the way in which you prepare and get ready to go out and play.
It's funny. This is my third head coach that I've covered Boston College with, like third that it went, not just being a fan in the stands. And Bill O'Brien said something to me and you that he said that I had heard from Jeff Hafley and Steve Adazio before him, which is, hey, in basketball, in college basketball, you get 35 odd games. In the NBA, you get 82 games. You get an 82 game college hockey season, 82 game pro hockey season, 30 game college hockey season. I wish we had 82 college hockey games. That'd be awesome. College hockey is something that you and I will talk about at another time. We'll just leave it at that, right?
We could discuss that at another point.
Yeah. But you get so finite on football, the amount of games you get to play. And I think being able to play that, why are you playing it? Ben Glines, who was a receiver for BC a number of years back, said, what is your why? And he's like, what is my why for playing football? We asked that, and because he would do anything on the football field just to get on there. And answering the why of playing together as a team, I think was a big part in drawing this BC team back together, because they had bought in to the university, they bought into each other, and then bought into the sell of whatever head coach Bill O'Brien was telling them. But you're hearing it now among some of the other things, why Boston College, and you're hearing him talk about different speakers, different people who've come to speak at practices and preseason. It's extending beyond football, and we're finding out that the investment of the finite number of games both is, I'm going to appreciate this, and there is something more than just football.
Yeah, so the tough thing about football is if you're a dweller, you dwell on things, it sits with you for a while because you got to wait a week to play. Where if you're playing basketball, baseball, hockey, usually you have a next game, you have a next shift, you have a next time on the court. So you get to go back out there and exercise the demons quicker. Football doesn't give you many opportunities. If you look at the amount of time that you practice and prepare for real games, the numbers are crazy, and how much the preparation is over the results things where you get to see wins and losses, right? So when you play very frequently, you have to almost get numb to the extent that, okay, I had one bad game, tomorrow I get another chance to go do it. In football, it's, I have one bad game, I need to correct it soon, otherwise 25% of my season's over after 3 games, right? So all of a sudden, like, things get real. You're like, I can't afford to ease my way into the season. I got to hit the ground running 100 miles an hour because I have so limited amount of opportunities to do that. And that urgency is something I think you see. It's what I've heard about the practices, that there's a lot of urgency. As I mentioned before, I haven't had a lot of time to go over there. So I'm doing my best, but I'm listening to a lot of the other podcasts that are updating me on the progress so far. But that opportunity is so small that you don't have the luxury to just, take your time and get into things. You got to come out ready to go and start performing and make changes and make adjustments and to refine your process so that you're getting the most out of it.
Turning the corner to Florida State this week, Florida State lost to Georgia Tech last week. We mentioned that, but it was kind of the way the game went for Florida State that turned into such a shocker, I guess. And it started with quarterback DJ Uiagalelei, who people conceivably remember from his debut during the COVID year in 2020 when he played for Clemson. Never quite developed into the next one for Clemson. He did have 2,500 yards, 22 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in 2022, but never really made the jump, which I still find it funny, by the way, that 2,500 yards passing is not like what people are expecting, because you go back to the 90s and you threw for 2,500 yards, you were an All-American.
Yeah, you're pretty high up there.
I'm pretty sure 3,000 yards was unattainable in 1995, right?
Except for like Tim Couch and Drew Brees, but yeah, pretty much. You didn't see many guys that were slinging it that much back then.
But DJ transferred to Oregon State last year, threw for 2,600 yards, similar numbers to what happened at Clemson. And last week threw for 193 yards, did not have a touchdown, but also didn't throw a pick. But I'm not quite sure at this point what people are expecting out of him, because if I look at the numbers and I look at the performances, I saw a quarterback last week who was doing exactly what I guess I would have expected out of. Like, I would have expected him to do. He was high percentage, checkdowns 2-3 yards, didn't throw a lot, like doesn't throw the ball particularly deep, but that's kind of what he was for the last couple of years. He's a good quarterback and is good at what he does. And he's playing on a team that maybe needed to add 1 or 2 different facets against Georgia Tech that weren't there. And Scott, when they come to play against Boston College, rather, they will have those other aspects in play. They are not going to be a team that only runs for 98 yards. They are going to try to run the football very well against you.
Yeah, and that's Florida State, you want to talk about the whole, every team's different. Florida State's completely different. It's a different team. They got a lot of transfers that came in. You lose a guy like Travis, who was very dynamic, Romeo Travis, who's very dynamic with his feet, had a tremendous amount of leadership. He had been at Florida State for a while, right? Let's not forget that. So it's going to take them time to kind of figure out their identity, but there's a lot of talent there. So when that talent figures it out, you don't want to be the other side of it. So it's almost better to get Florida State earlier in the year than it is later once they figure it out. But Florida State seemed, and I watched the entire game, they didn't really seem comfortable letting DJ throw the ball down the field. Now, maybe that was because Georgia Tech was playing a lot of man and a lot of guys weren't getting open. That could have been a fact. Could it have been that maybe the conditions were a factor, because it was wet and it was raining there? And it seemed like there were moments that Florida State had opportunities to take advantage and seize control of that game, and they missed them. They missed their windows. And then Georgia Tech, to their credit, especially Haynes King, played an outstanding game. He was outstanding running the football, really put that Florida State defense in a bind with his legs. And something about Georgia Tech and Ireland, maybe they're an Irish school deep down because they beat BC when we were out there a couple years ago in a last minute drive. They did the same to Florida State, but credit to them for how well they played. I don't want to say they surprised Florida State, but they're a dynamic offensive team. You saw that last year. BC was able to win a couple possessions there, get a turnover there that really seized control of the game, but that was a shootout. Their offense is problematic, and they made some changes defensively with their coordinator, but they did give Florida State some fits. Now, that being said, can you count on that same thing next week at home in a big night game? I doubt it. And if you're naive or stupid to think that this Florida State team is not learning from that lesson. So BC's got to come out and see what Georgia Tech did that made them effective, but don't go away from what BC is. Because too many times teams will see what was successful in beating a quote unquote more physically talented team, and they try to change who they are to fit that. And you really can't do that, because if you don't really work with the identity of your team, you can't just change that week to week to all of a sudden try to be something you're not. So BC has to incorporate some of what Georgia Tech did, but also maintain their identity of what they're trying to do. So that's going to be the challenge. But the one thing that I feel very confident about, and it will be more apparent as the year goes on, is the guy on the sideline will be in complete control of whatever happens. Now, Bill, Coach O'Brien is an emotional guy, right? He's intense, but he's been there, man. He's done that. He's not going to blink. Like, Coach O'Brien is not going to blink. I mean, they may get beat, but it's not going to be because they weren't prepared. It's not going to be because they weren't disciplined. It's not going to be because they didn't, want to compete. I think that's something you cannot underestimate, is having that experience to look at your leader and being like, wow, we're right there, and he's going to help us through that. And to have that ability to rely on your coach that way is something that lets the players play free, and that lets them just go do it, because when the coaches control, then they're like, all right, I just got to go do what I do.
I know it's on the road, but what's on the Mutryn platter for pregame? What are we hoping for,
dude? So I don't know what the travel schedule is. We'll have to hit Brendan after this. I'm hoping it's not until later on Sunday, because we got a late game. It's tough staying. Florida State is not the easiest of travel, based on kind of where the hotels are and stuff like that. So last time we played a night game there, we meet her because he's fanatical, wanted to get to the stadium at 11 for a 7:30 game, which just doesn't suit me well. So I had to go explore and grab some lunch around at some of the local restaurants around there. But it's a great atmosphere, man. Florida State's a really cool campus. It's a really, really cool environment. Maybe I'll hit one of the spots that I was there last time, and then go head up to the press box for a pregame nap, because, man, it's going to be a late one. I mean, I'm just picturing in my head when I'm pulling into my driveway on Tuesday, and I'm guessing a 7 to 8 a.m. arrival. So I'm going to be pretty much garbage until Duquesne, I'm guessing. That's my guess. And then hopefully I'll get right back into it. And then, as soon as I get comfortable, I'm going to go hit one of the states that I haven't been to, Danny, by the way. I've got out of the 50 states, this is going to be my 42nd when I go to Missouri. So
okay.
I'm psyched to knock another one off the list. I may have an opportunity to go knock a couple off for various reasons, as you mentioned before, because where my boys are going to be. But I'm looking forward to knocking another state off the list. And I don't know much about Missouri, but when that comes around, we can talk about it. I'm going to get some. I'll get some Yelp reviews. I'll take some online suggestions from people. I'm really, really looking forward to that. But this Florida State trip, it's going to be good because what a great way to start the season. But I will say this: let's not overreact either way. Right. We love to do it because of, like you said, the finite amount of games. There's only 12 or so, not including bowl game, but don't judge what happens week one. Let's see what happens as this team kind of progresses with Coach O'Brien. It's easy to jump to conclusions, but don't talk too big or be too wise on certain things. I think you need to just let it come to you and look at the body of work instead of this small one sample.
Oh, I am absolutely going to overreact.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
what I
sure you
do.
will.
Yeah,
Everyone
I'm
does. This is what we
100% going
do.
to do it.
Yeah,
What was I
and
going
who
to
knows?
say?
And I do too, right? No doubt I'll probably be getting some Twitter spat with somebody just because I can't help myself. And even though, turning 49 years old this year, I am still a child. I believe that. At least my wife will say that. I will definitely engage in irrational thoughts in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I have been without a vehicle for over a month because my car died in the middle of July while I was driving on the highway with two children in the back seat. So that was a rewarding experience. So because I've been basically cemented to my house for the last month, and can't go anywhere freely because I have to borrow someone's set of wheels for it. I am
What happened to your car? How do you
oh
lose a
yeah,
car for 2 weeks?
the
What
the
kind of car
oh
are you driving?
so my car died on the high. Oh, it's been gone. It's been gone for a full month and a half now. I was on the highway driving to the Cape and just lost everything. Engine dead. Everything just went, which is shocking because it was a Camry with under 100,000 miles. So we
Um, so wait a minute. Hold on a sec. So everything ceased. Did you maintenance the car?
I
Did you
did.
like get oil changes? You did.
Yes.
Okay.
It was contaminated gas was what I was told.
So you put diesel in your car?
No, I don't know where it happened, but everyone wants to
Uh,
tell me that I put in like gypsy gas somewhere and it's my own fault and I was doing. I don't know. I must have gone to like a bad gas station or something. I can't. I don't know where it was. Don't know anything. But I have been. But not having a vehicle for a month, I literally only leave my house to go to the supermarket or drop and pick up my children right now, with the exception of the couple of games that I was allowed, key quote, allowed to go to watch some
mhm.
soccer games over in Newton campus. So
Yeah. See, now you're
it's
figuring
been a
out what
grind.
marriage is all about.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
a
I
grind.
mean, well,
I am going to overreact to this
don't
football game.
okay. Well, don't be such a cheapskate with gas in your car and stop getting contaminated gas. Be better. On your way to the Cape, where was it?
Milton, right after Route 24, literally
Oh,
in the second left lane. So I
wait.
was doing
You were on 24 when it went down?
no, I was on 128.
Well, you're lucky because if you're on 24, you probably would have gotten run over because that highway is literally the closest thing to a speedway I think Massachusetts has. If you're not going 85 in that left lane, you're getting past.
Yep.
So if you were down Route 3, I would have said you should have given me a call. I would have been more than happy to help out because that's the type of guy I am. But that's lesson learned. So hopefully you
Yeah,
get everything fixed up for Duquesne.
I am hopeful. Well, I junked the car and just decided to buy. I was like, I realize what this sounds like when I say it. I just bought another one. Um, but but I said next time I wished I'd just made it a little bit further down Route 3 below my. I will have to give shout out to my dad. My dad left the Cape, drove to pick me up. We sent the car on the tow truck back to Metro West, and
Mm-hmm.
he literally picked me up. My wife had the two screaming kids, and my dad and I stopped to get lunch on the way down. He was like, "Yeah, well, she doesn't have to know that the tow truck was on the way. I'm gonna pick you up." So my dad picked me up, got me lunch.
Way to go,
So
Dad.
yeah. So like I said, September 2nd is gonna roll around,
That's
and
good.
I am gonna overreact, and I am gonna smoke meat. I am gonna go absolutely wild for that game in the Rubin household. It is gonna be the smoker's gonna be
I would
cranking.
expect nothing but.
Yeah, we got ribs that are ready to go. We got the dry
Mm.
rubs. I'm going. I'm going. We're gonna make some homemade cornbread. I'm gonna go nuts.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
impressive. I
I
like
need
that. I
something.
could use that. I could use that. That sounds tasty.
Well, the game Monday night, September 2nd, 7:30 p.m. Doak Campbell Stadium, Tallahassee, Florida, the capital city of the Sunshine State up in the Panhandle. The Florida State Seminoles host the Boston College Eagles. It is the opening game of the 2024 season, the opening game of the Bill O'Brien era, the opening game of the ACC schedule, and the official start to fall in September. So I can't wait.
Danny, can I ask you something though before
Please
we
do
break
so.
off into this? What are you most now? Obviously, food. So let's exclude that. What are you most excited about to see from this team this year?
gets me out of my house on a Saturday.
I love simple goals. I like it. I like it. Keep it simple.
Not
I
a
respect
child in
that.
the press box. I love my kids. I love my kids dearly, but they're 3 and almost 2. So it's a lot. No, I honestly, I'm looking for the next step. Like, I'm excited for the next step. I've watched them a couple times and I've seen kind of what they're trying to do in practice and drilling and how they bring it together. And,
Mhm.
and actually asked about that after a practice. I said, okay, see them split out, and then you come back to 7-on-7 and then 11-on-11, and kind of just how they drew it all together. I really just want to see it against a real opponent. And that's
Mhm.
kind of what I'm most excited about with this team. Is we've talked all offseason about the playmakers. We talked about bringing in Bill O'Brien. We talked about everything. What I'm most excited about is putting pen to paper and getting results and getting something to look at to say this works, this doesn't in the early part, and then seeing that develop over the course of the season. I think last year, after they settled on the quarterback situation and Castellanos took it over, they spent the entire season more or less building the offense around him and taking the play set and getting more and more complex and seeing what he could do. And then when they hit their stride, they were really good. After that stretch with the path, I can't wait to see what happens when you have a full preseason, a first game, what works, what doesn't, a second game 5 days later, what works, what doesn't, put it all together, see what happens in the third game at Mizzou, what works, what doesn't, and continue that over the course of the year, because I think it's going to look very different than most things BC's had.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary of that. I think in simpler terms, I'm anxious to see how they handle the adversity and what it's going to look like on that end. Because you got a lot of experience on this team, right? You got guys that have played a good amount of games now, and it's. I don't think they're going to be intimidated by environments or personnel, but you never know until you're put in that situation. And I think that's something that will be a hallmark of this team is how they handle that adversity. Because if they handle it well, it could go very well for them. If not, it could snowball and be pretty bad. Because you can, have you ever seen the movie The Replacements when Gene
Love that
Hackman's
movie.
talking to the team and he's talking about what happened to us out there, and he says quicksand
Quicksand.
and quicksand and
Got to say it with the
James
Keanu
Falco,
voice.
right? Yeah, quicksand. Uh, he's he explains of what it feels like is that you try harder and you fight harder through it, but you just keep falling further and further, getting deeper and deeper in the sand. So it's going to be interesting to see how they see that when they get to that adversity part. You'd like to think that with the experience they have, with the experience on the staff, that they'll handle it well, but until you're in that moment, you just don't know.
Well, pain heals, chicks take
Oh,
scars,
yeah.
glory lasts forever.
Yeah, it's an honor sharing the field of battle with you guys.
And just like that, we are back to midseason form.
Who would have doubted?
Well, this has been a presentation of Committed to BC, the official podcast of Boston College football. Be sure to visit our page on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite streaming platforms to rate, review, and subscribe to stay up to date with all of our latest content. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming on the Pod Network, on the podcast for Boston this year. We got students, we've got athletes, we've got Galante's doing something. I know that he's got some things that are popping up. I know he did a couple things with the football program on there that's on there. So check all that out and just we're hammering the content machine at you. For tickets to Boston College football, visit bceagles.com or call 617-552-GO-BC. Special thank you to guest Bill O'Brien, the head coach of the Boston College Eagles, Boston College Director of Athletics Blake James, Boston College Sports Property General Manager Mike Wynn, and all those who make these broadcasts possible. Until next time, we will see you on the podcast for Boston. Enjoy the rest of your week. It's football season, folks. Go Eagles.